While the bear was hunting one afternoon, he saw a pack of wolves attacking one of their own. The bear kept his distance, watching silently as the pack tore into their injured member. Somehow, the lone wolf managed to escape, bleeding, limping, but alive. Titan had seen many brutal things in his 8 years roaming the Alaskan wilderness, but there was something particularly savage about watching wolves turn on their own kind. The massive grizzly, weighing close to 900 pounds with fur the color of dark chocolate streaked with silver, had been tracking the scent of elk through the dense forest when the sounds of snarling and yelping had drawn him toward a clearing carved out by lightning strikes and forest fire years before. From his vantage point behind a cluster of ancient spruce trees, Titan watched the violence unfold with the detached interest of a predator who understood that nature's laws were written in blood. 7 wolves moved with coordinated brutality, their bodies forming a shifting circle of teeth and fury around a smaller wolf who fought with the desperation of the condemned. The afternoon sun filtered through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows across the snow-dusted ground, illuminating the crimson spray that marked each successful strike. The victim was young, perhaps 2 years old, with fur the color of winter storms and a distinctive white blaze that ran from his nose to between his ears like a lightning bolt frozen in time. His right front leg hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, forcing him to pivot and dodge on 3 legs while trying to fend off attacks from all directions. Blood matted his coat, dripping steadily onto the frozen earth, creating a growing pool of red that steamed in the cold air. The alpha of the pack was unmistakable, a battle-scarred brute with eyes like chips of amber ice and a coat marked by dozens of old wounds. He hung back, letting his subordinates do the dirty work, occasionally darting in to deliver a calculated bite when the younger wolf's defenses faltered. This wasn't just a dominance display or a fight over food. This was an execution. The injured wolf fought brilliantly despite his handicap. He used his good legs to spring sideways when 3 wolves lunged simultaneously, causing 2 of them to collide in a tangle of fur and snapping jaws. He caught one attacker's ear between his teeth and tore downward, eliciting a howl of pain. When the alpha finally moved in for the killing blow, aiming for the vulnerable throat, the young wolf did something unexpected. He went low instead of trying to dodge away, rolling under the alpha's charge and using his momentum to slash upward with his teeth, catching the larger wolf's soft underbelly. The alpha yelped in surprise and pain, blood welling from the shallow cut. It wasn't a mortal wound, but it was an insult, a mark of defiance that sent the pack leader into a rage. He howled, a sound of pure fury that echoed through the forest, and the entire pack surged forward for the final assault. But the young wolf had used that crucial second of chaos to break free. He burst through a gap in the circle, running with a lurching 3-legged gait that should have been comical, but instead spoke of an iron will to survive. Blood trailed behind him like a crimson thread, and his breathing came in ragged gasps that Titan could hear even from 50 yards away. The wolf crashed into the underbrush, disappearing into the dense thicket of alder and willow that bordered the clearing. The pack gave chase, their howls rising into a chorus of bloodlust, but the alpha's sharp bark cut through the noise. The wolves stopped at the edge of the thicket, their bodies tense with unfulfilled aggression. The alpha, still bleeding from his belly wound, stared into the shadows where their victim had vanished, then raised his scarred muzzle and howled again. This time, it wasn't rage. It was a declaration. The traitor was banished, cast out into the wilderness to die alone, as all exiles must. The pack turned as one and loped away in the opposite direction, their forms fading into the forest like gray ghosts. Within minutes, the clearing was silent again, marked only by disturbed snow, scattered blood drops, and the lingering scent of violence. Titan remained motionless for several more minutes, his massive head tilted slightly as he processed what he'd witnessed. The bear's sensitive nose caught the scent trail left by the injured wolf, blood and fear and the particular musk of an animal in mortal distress. His instincts told him to move on, to continue his hunt for the elk whose tracks he'd been following. But Titan found himself following the blood trail anyway, drawn by curiosity and something else he couldn't quite name. Later that day, the bear had just eaten his fill when he noticed the same wounded wolf staring at the carcass from a distance. For reasons he couldn't explain, the bear felt pity and stepped aside, letting the wolf eat the leftovers. That small mercy gave the wolf enough strength to recover. The elk, a young bull whose antlers showed he was perhaps 3 years old, had made a fatal mistake earlier in the afternoon. It had chosen to bed down for the evening in a grove of aspen trees surrounded by deep snow, assuming the thick powder would alert it to approaching predators. What it hadn't counted on was a bear with the patience of stone and the cunning of a creature who'd survived 8 brutal winters. Titan's charge had been devastating, a 900-pound avalanche of muscle and claws that closed the distance in seconds. The elk tried to run, its hooves churning through the deep snow, but Titan was faster. His massive paw swept out, catching the elk's back leg and sending it tumbling. Before it could recover, the bear's jaws were on its throat, his powerful bite crushing the windpipe and severing the major arteries. Now, as the sun began its descent toward the jagged peaks of the Alaska Range, Titan sat beside his kill, methodically tearing flesh from bone, his powerful jaws crushing through cartilage and sinew as he fed. He was nearly satisfied, his belly full and heavy, when he felt the weight of eyes upon him. Titan looked up sharply, a low growl rumbling in his chest. 50 yards away, barely visible in the gathering dusk, sat the wolf, the same wolf from the clearing. His gray fur was matted with dried blood, and his broken leg was swollen to twice its normal size, the paw dangling uselessly. But those eyes, pale yellow, almost white in certain light, stared at the carcass with an intensity that transcended mere hunger. The bear could see the wolf's ribs pressing against his hide, could smell the infection already setting into his wounds. This creature was dying. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Without a pack to hunt with, without the strength to bring down prey alone, he was already a ghost. Titan's first instinct was to charge, to defend his hard-won meal. He'd fought off wolves before, sent them running with roars that shook snow from the trees. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the memory of that fight in the clearing, the courage it took to keep fighting when the entire world wanted you dead. Perhaps it was something deeper, some understanding that passed between 2 predators who'd both learned that survival was its own kind of warfare. The bear stood, and the wolf's muscles tensed, ready to flee despite his injuries. But Titan didn't charge. Instead, he turned his back on the carcass and walked away, moving toward a nearby stream where he could drink and wash the blood from his muzzle. Behind him, he heard the wolf approach, cautious, limping, disbelieving. Then came the sounds of feeding, the tearing of flesh, the cracking of smaller bones, the desperate gulping of an animal who hadn't eaten in days. Titan drank deeply from the cold stream, letting the sound wash over him. When he finally turned back, the wolf had taken what he needed and retreated to the tree line, leaving plenty of meat still on the carcass. Their eyes met across the clearing. The wolf lowered his head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Then he disappeared into the shadows. Days passed. The wolf began following the bear, always keeping a respectful distance. The bear didn't mind. He had grown used to the quiet company, and his presence kept the wolf safe from other predators. At first, Titan tried to discourage this behavior. He would growl warnings, would charge short distances, would rear up on his hind legs to display his full 900-pound bulk in all its terrifying glory. But the wolf never fled in panic. He simply trotted away to a safer distance, waited for Titan to calm down, then resumed following at a respectful distance of between 50 and 100 yards. After a week of this, Titan stopped trying. After 2 weeks, he stopped noticing it as strange. The wolf, Titan had begun thinking of him as Ghost because of how quietly he moved, was healing. His limp had improved, and the wounds were closing, leaving pink scars beneath his gray fur. He caught mice and ground squirrels, sustained himself on scraps and whatever else he could find, but he was still too weak for serious hunting. What surprised Titan most was how Ghost's presence changed things. Other predators, the younger, more aggressive bears, the coyotes, even the occasional mountain lion, gave him wider berth now. They saw the wolf following the bear and sensed something dangerous in that partnership, something unnatural that made them wary. Titan found himself wandering into territories he'd previously avoided, secure in the knowledge that he wasn't truly alone. Ghost grew stronger each day, his muscles filling out, his confidence returning. He supplemented his diet by catching snowshoe hares and ptarmigan, brilliant at reading the snow and knowing where prey had hidden. The wolf shared Titan's kills, and in return, his presence provided protection that went beyond the physical, a second set of eyes, ears that could detect danger from twice the distance, a companion in a wilderness that showed no mercy to the solitary.
When food became scarce and the bear grew too slow to hunt, fate shifted again. As the bear stalked a moose, the wolf suddenly burst from the bushes, chasing the terrified animal straight toward the bear's waiting claws. With one powerful strike, the bear brought the moose down. That day marked the beginning of their partnership, a bond born of hunger, survival, and unexpected loyalty. Winter was approaching fast, and Titan knew he needed to build serious fat reserves if he was going to survive hibernation. The problem was that prey had become increasingly scarce. The caribou herds had moved north, the salmon were gone, and even the smaller animals seemed to have vanished into their winter dens. For 3 days, Titan had been tracking a bull moose, a massive creature with antlers that spanned 6 feet across. The moose was old and slow, possibly sick, exactly the kind of target a desperate bear might take down. But moose were dangerous. One kick from those powerful legs could shatter Titan's jaw. One thrust from those antlers could disembowel him. The opportunity came on a gray afternoon when the wind blew from the north, carrying the smell of approaching snow. The moose was feeding in a meadow, tearing mouthfuls of willow branches from the bushes that lined a frozen stream. Titan approached from downwind, his massive body pressed low to the ground, moving with the patience of a creature who understood that one mistake could mean death. He was 30 yards away, muscles coiled for the final charge, when the moose's head snapped up. Something had spooked it. A sound Titan hadn't heard, a smell carried on a shifting breeze. The moose turned to run, and Titan knew he'd lost his chance. The creature would crash into the forest, would disappear into terrain where even a bear couldn't follow. But then, Ghost emerged from the underbrush. The wolf burst from cover like a gray bullet, moving faster than Titan had thought possible. Ghost didn't attack the moose. He wasn't strong enough for that. Instead, he snapped at its legs, darted between its hooves, drove it into a panic. And that panic sent the moose running in exactly one direction, straight toward the bear. Titan didn't hesitate. Years of instinct took over. He rose from concealment, all 900 pounds of muscle and fury, and met the charging moose head-on. His massive paws, armed with claws as long as a man's fingers, swept out in a devastating arc. The impact was tremendous, the sound of flesh meeting flesh, the crack of breaking bone. The moose stumbled, its momentum carrying it forward even as its legs gave out beneath it. The bear and the moose went down together, rolling in a tangle of fur and antlers and flying snow. Titan's jaws found the moose's throat, his teeth punching through the thick hide, crushing the windpipe. The moose kicked once, twice, then went still. Titan stood over his kill, breathing hard, his heart hammering in his chest. He looked across the fallen body and saw Ghost sitting calmly at the edge of the meadow, tongue lolling, yellow eyes bright with satisfaction. The wolf had driven the prey directly into his ambush. They had hunted together. For a long moment, bear and wolf stared at each other across the steaming carcass. Then Titan stepped back, making room at the kill. Ghost approached cautiously, still expecting a challenge, but the bear simply watched as the wolf began to feed. They ate together in silence, two predators sharing a meal they'd earned as partners. That day marked the end of their old lives and the beginning of something new.
Together, they fought off other wolves and became an unstoppable pair. The bear and the outcast wolf, brothers of the wild. The partnership deepened with each passing season. Ghost's superior speed and senses, combined with Titan's raw power, created a hunting machine unlike anything the wilderness had seen. They developed a language of their own, not words, but something deeper. A certain angle of Ghost's ears meant danger ahead. A particular rumble from Titan's chest meant stay close. They learned each other's rhythms, strengths and weaknesses, until they moved through the forest like two parts of a single predator. Their greatest battle came on a frozen December morning when Ghost's old pack returned. 7 wolves, led by the scarred alpha who'd tried to kill him, surrounded them on a frozen lake. The pack had tracked Ghost for days, driven by wolf grudges that demanded traitors be punished. The fight was fierce and brutal. Titan took on 4 wolves at once, his size and power overwhelming their speed. Ghost fought with a fury born of long-suppressed rage, settling old scores with the alpha. When it was over, 2 wolves lay dead on the ice, 3 more limped away bleeding, and the remaining 2 had fled into the forest. Ghost raised his scarred muzzle and howled his victory into the winter sky, a sound that echoed across the mountains, announcing to the world that he'd found something more powerful than any pack: brotherhood. They survived everything together: forest fires that forced them to swim across icy lakes, territorial grizzlies that challenged Titan's domain, late spring blizzards where they huddled together for warmth, the wolf pressed against the bear's thick fur, sharing body heat and trust. On a crisp autumn morning, when Titan was 11 and Ghost was 8, they stood together on a ridge overlooking the vast territory they'd claimed as their own. The bear's massive form cast a long shadow in the rising sun, and the wolf's smaller silhouette stood beside it, inseparable and eternal. Below them, the wilderness stretched endlessly, forests and mountains, rivers and valleys, all teeming with life that followed ancient rules. But Titan and Ghost had written their own rules, had proven that survival sometimes meant breaking every law that nature had established. Park rangers began reporting sightings of the legendary pair. Wildlife photographers came from around the world, hoping to capture images of the bear and wolf who hunted together. Scientists studied them, writing papers about unprecedented interspecies cooperation. But Titan and Ghost paid no attention to the humans with their cameras and theories. They had their own understanding, forged in blood and hunger and unexpected mercy. They had learned what it meant to be brothers, not by birth or species, but by choice. That small act of mercy years ago, when a bear stepped away from his kill and a wolf accepted charity from his natural enemy, had created something far greater than either could have achieved alone. They were Titan and Ghost, the bear and the outcast wolf, brothers of the wild whose legend would outlive them both. And as they descended from the ridge to begin another day of hunting together, the wilderness itself seemed to acknowledge their bond, whispering their story through the wind in the trees, a testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from knowing when to stand together.
If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep bringing you more powerful stories every week.